Hello and welcome to the second part of my Penny Dreadful skull selfie. This is where I will take you through the steps of me retouching the picture in Lightroom and Photoshop. On the screen at the moment you can see all the pictures I took from the session. The first few are me setting up, using the chair initially, getting my lightings right, and then the next three where I kept my clothes on and just to see if the pose would work. And then the next 25 pictures are all the shots I actually took with slightly different tweaks to my pose, to my hands, rounding my shoulders and things like that. My favourite shot out of the session was actually the fourth one that we took. So I will go into the develop module with that now. On the screen at the moment is the straight out of camera picture directly as it was imported into Lightroom. The first thing I'm going to do is to apply my basic homebrew preset that I apply to all my pictures, usually on import when they come into Lightroom. Next we will turn it into black and white to get rid of my lobster-like skin tones, and then I will just change the white balance slightly, because even though the picture is in black and white, adjusting the white balance can give it a different tones to the greys. I will then increase the contrast on the image, increase the whites slightly, and lower the blacks. I'm also going to add +20 to the clarity. And one other thing I like to do with black and white pictures, especially portraits, is in the black and white section, click the auto button, but then I reset the reds and the oranges. I think by clicking the auto button it gives you a pretty good black and white from Lightroom, but I like to reset the reds and the oranges as that lightens the skin tones, and the majority of my work involves people or our portrait work. I think that it just makes the skin a bit smoother, makes it pop out a little bit more. So that is as far as I'm taking this image in Lightroom. I've now opened this picture in Photoshop. And the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of these distractions of my kitchen and my camera bags at the edge of the picture. So to do that, I'm going to be using Fill Content Aware, and that does a pretty good job that side. And also with my light stand this side. Edit, Fill, Content Aware. Absolutely magic, and that's done a pretty good job that side. I am then going to crop the picture just to centralise me slightly. All I'm really doing is taking off this right hand side here. I'm quite pleased with how that looks. I will now make the eye sockets darker. I've tried various ways of doing this, and the most effective and simplest way I found was to create a new layer and just paint them in with black. Going a bit closer, drop the opacity down so we can see the underlying image. Get the eraser tool, 100%, slightly harder edge, and really shrink it down in size, because I just want to go around the edges here. I think that's filled in the eye sockets quite nicely. However, on this eye socket I think it's a bit too dark where my knee is, so I'm just going to reduce the opacity of my brush down to about 25%. Nice and feathered, quite a large brush, and just bring some of my knee back in there. I think that works. Pause. quite happy with my eye sockets there now, so I'm going to flatten that down. I just noticed a few little bits by this thumb that we need to sort out. Better. Zoom out, have a look at that, and I'm going to flatten the layers there now. The next thing I want to do is just to clean up the background a little bit. My kitchen floor has actually come out so much better than I ever could have imagined there, and I think just the natural vignette that it's created, I love it. I don't need to do much to that, but there's a couple of lumps and bumps on the flooring here that I am going to get rid of. And a few sort of little bits of dust and spots and things. So I'm going to use my patch tool. Looking at this, I've got this little scar on my leg that I actually got when I was in the Scouts and we were out camping, I think, and I fell down a ditch and cut it on it was either a piece of broken glass or a piece of metal that was sticking out of the ground. Not that you really need to know the backstory to that, and I would usually leave in permanent marks. Alright, let's try that with the patch tool. Might do it a bit better. There we are, that's nice and even. I'm going to leave my tattoos in because they are me. And I did some shots without my wedding band on. But in the end, you know what? That's me. So I'm going to leave those in. But I just felt that that little scar was a bit too distracting as it kind of drew your eye towards it. I'm going to add some contrast to this picture. So I'm going to bring up my curves. And just pop an S-curve in there. Classic way to get some contrast. But then what I'm also going to do is reduce the opacity on my brush and brush back in some of the flooring, because I don't really want that to be too contrasty. I don't want that to take away from me. So we'll brush some of that back in, just on the highlights. It's probably one of those things that looking at the screen now, you don't really notice what it's doing. But when I turn that layer on and off, that's it. It just makes me, I know I use this word a lot, pop out a little bit more, but while sort of keeping the background more of a muted grey without it being too contrasty there. So I quite like that. Right, I'm going to flatten that again. I think I'm just going to tone down my ears slightly. Again, they're very bright and they're just a little bit distracting. So to do this, and again to just mute them down, I'm just going to get another blending layer, change the blending mode to darken. Keep the opacity of the brush at 100%, but reduce the opacity of the layer down to about 50%. And I'm just going to colour them in. And let's zoom out and see how that looks. So they look a bit flat there. There we are, just about 25% off. I think that just mutes them down enough that they're not distracting. Maybe take them down to 20. I like round numbers. Yeah, that works for me. So let's flatten that layer. And with my hands, I'm going to bring up another curves adjustment layer, and I just want them to look a bit more, just to take away the highlights slightly. So I'm going to bring the midtones down, but I'm also dragging my white point down. So my sort of base white point. And let's fill that in. And then I'm just going to go into my hands and kind of feather that and erase that curved layer. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's cool. I think I went a bit too far up my arm there. Quite like those highlights there. It's just on my fingers really that I want to avoid it. So yeah, happy with that. Let's turn that off and on. Yes, I think that's working wonders. I'm not too sure about it on my ears actually. I'm gonna get rid of that one. Yeah. Okay, happy with that. So off and on. If anything, there might be a little bit too much. So I'm just going to reduce the opacity of that. There we are, because I just didn't want them glaring out nice, really bright. So we'll take that to about there. Right, happy with that one. Excellent. Flatten that again. We are getting there. I've just noticed my toenails. I'm going to zoom in on those, and I'm also going to reduce how bright they are by using that adjustment layer that we've already got sorted there. Don't want to hide them completely, but just so they're not quite as distracting. Apologies for zooming in this close on my toenails. Oh. That's it. I was just taking the highlights down slightly on those. Let's flatten the layers down again. And as I've mentioned, I love the natural vignette that we've got around the edges. I'm just going to add a tiny bit more to it along the top there, I think. That's all I wanted to do. I'm now just going to tone it slightly. So with this, over on my adjustments over here, I'm going to go to colour lookup, and this is one I use quite a lot, is the teal and orange plus contrast. But then I change the blending mode to soft light and reduce the opacity down. I usually take it down to about sort of 10 or 15%, just so it adds like a hint of toning into the image. And I think if you're using an image that's had lots of layers from separate sources, it tends to tie everything together. It puts the same tone across everything that you're doing. But on this shot, I just wanted to try it and see how it looked. And I quite like that. It does. It just gives it an extra bit of contrast and a slight cooler tone to it. Yeah, I'm going to leave that at, what should we say for this one? Do you know what? Let's go crazy. Let's put this one at, yeah, 20. Let's be really crazy and put it at 27%. I'd normally go 25-30, but feeling a little bit wild today. We're going the middle, 27%. Right, I'm going to flatten that down and put it up full screen. I'm happy with that. So let's compare the before and afters. So that was the before, and that's the after, the final picture. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time.